So I'm going to keep my remarks on the floor funding portion of this bill. I know there are a couple of different aspects that deal with the districts with their contribution rate and with the employee contribution for the OPEB. Those two issues aside, those are just policy decisions. They don't affect how well the system gets funded over time, but the floor funding does. So I'm going to keep my remarks specific on the floor funding provision. The idea of getting rid of the floor or not paying the floor is a really bad idea, and it's going to be very costly over time. The pension system is still over $30 billion in debt. In previous legislation that I sponsored and got implemented, there were two mechanisms that were put in place to make the plan healthier and more solvent over time. The first was to lower the payroll growth assumption, and that's pretty boring and technical, and we didn't lower it that much. We went from 3.5% down to 0, so it doesn't sound like it would be that big of a deal. But little changes in that make a big deal. The other mechanism that was put in place was a floor funding provision. We wanted to make it so we didn't pay this amount this year, and then the next year we pay less, and we whipsaw back and forth. If you look from like 2000 to 2017, when I was working on this stuff, our annual payments would fluctuate up and down every year by large degrees. There's a couple years where we were off by almost 30%. We underpaid what our payment should have been by almost 30%. So this was to try to help prevent that underfunding from happening. Well, I find it interesting that both of those mechanisms have been undermined by Michigan Democrats. I fought for years and spent a ton of political capital to get the payroll growth assumption back to where it should be. So I was able to stop the rate of the pension fund once, and that was through House Bill 6357 of 2022. This time, the Democrats are doing it through a different way. They're undermining the floor funding provision, and it's to fulfill their insatiable appetite to spend $670 million that should be going into the retirement system, a system that's over $30 billion in debt. It's not going to go there. It's going to be redirected elsewhere. These costs are not going to go away. They're only being pushed down the road. And when they're pushed down the road further, you incur more interest costs. It's more expensive, puts retirees' benefits at risk. It takes money out of the classroom to help educate our kids. This is really bad policy. And all of this maneuver hinges on ORS's interpretation that the floor funding that I got put in place has two floors, one for the retiree health care and one for the pension. I'm getting tired of talking about it. I've talked about it multiple times here on the floor. I asked ORS in April, over 5 months ago, for how they came to that legal opinion. They said in committee they talked to the Attorney General's office. I still haven't heard any word. It would have been nice to know their legal justification before we voted on a bill like this. So if their arguments had any merit, we would know, and as legislators, we would have a better idea of the full picture. Nope, still left in the dark. It's the way bureaucrats work. Withhold information, wait legislators out. Well, at least I'm still here for now. I stopped the pension rate once. I'll try to do it again. I hope I'm successful. It's not going to happen this term, I can tell you that. Not if this bill gets put into effect. At the end of the day, language aside, it doesn't matter what we put in this bill. What matters is conceptually, is it a good idea or a bad idea? It is a bad idea. Failing to pay your obligations has long-term implications. It makes it harder to fund education in the future, and it makes it harder for us to make sure we can pay our retirees the benefits they earned and are constitutionally protected. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this bill. Thank you, Madam President.